So what we know about the plot, it's very, very large. They want to do 3 times the size of 9/11. It's very simple. They want to do another aviation plot, but this time their intent is to take down about a dozen airliners using suicide bombers. They want to do, it's kind of like a siege on DC is the best way to put it, very Mumbai style. And then the last piece.
Just recently, the Counterterrorism Center issued a warning that said foreign terrorists are actively seeking how to engage American interests all over the world, in particular in the homeland. On today's show, I want to welcome Sarah Adams, who has, since her appearance on the Sean Ryan Show, has had a meteoric rise in not only describing the magnitude of what foreign terrorists, how they're training, how they're being funded, but more importantly, raising the flag, raising the alarm that something is coming to the American shoreline. And so it is an absolute honor and privilege to welcome Sarah to the show today. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. All right. So just to get for those who aren't aware and aren't paying attention, what is your prediction right now? What do you think has been in planning, and what is on the precipice of taking place?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a prediction. If people are unaware, we've been running human networks into Al-Qaeda for a decade now. Of course, it was to identify the terrorists who attacked us in Benghazi. But since the fall of Kabul, a lot of those Libyans went to Afghanistan, right? So the interesting part is everybody's coming back together, the band's back together, and that's why we have the threat picture we have. So what we know about the plot, it's very, very large. They want to do 3 times the size of 9/11. It's very simple. They want to do another aviation plot, but this time their intent is to take down about a dozen airliners using suicide bombers. They want to do, it's kind of like a siege on DC is the best way to put it, very Mumbai style. And then the last piece, ISIS is going to kind of handle this piece. They want to have attacks where you live, work, and play. These are community level attacks. So we're talking churches, shopping centers, hospitals, and their focus is really on communities that have a higher percentage of a veteran population because they want the veterans to feel in their hometowns what they felt in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan. That's supposed to be the feel of that piece.
Interesting. All right. And so as you've been tracking this, obviously, I mean, you were a former tracker yourself. The thing that really got me recently is you talked about the fact about Hamza bin Laden, the unification of all the different cells coming together. Have you seen as a result of that marriage that took place with Mullah Omar's daughter, right? Or is that what it was? And is an explosion because of how many cells are actually, or how many organizations have come together and are training now in Afghanistan and other places? Has the chatter just exploded around the world?
Yeah, I mean, a really important thing to understand is all of these terrorists, this first generation, so if we talk bin Laden, Zawahiris, the Libyans, it doesn't really matter, right? All of their kids intermarried, and now all their kids are in their 40s, and then the grandchildren are, right, bin Ladens, Omars or Haqqanis or whatever you want to call it. So first off, there seems to be a lot of confusion still in the government where they say Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Haqqani. Well, when you have the Minister of Defense of the Taliban, he's the brother-in-law of Hamza bin Laden, and you have the Minister of Interior, Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's the brother-in-law of Hamza bin Laden, and then you have Hamza bin Laden. How do you put Haqqani's Taliban and Al-Qaeda separate? If they're intermarried, they're no longer separate. So that's the first part. They just came together by marriage. Now, Hamza went back to an old plan his father had. It's nuanced called Islamic Army, but the real name is like the Islamic Resistance Council. And all this is for the last year, they've been making deals and partnerships with a number of terrorist groups. And so they will share training resources, share funding, work on plots together. If you're Al-Shabaab and you need 50 more guys to do some certain plot in Mogadishu, we'll provide you 50 from these other groups, right? It's proxy-based army is the best way to put it. So now when we talk about the homeland plot, all of this proxy army is coming to support it. So even though it's Al-Qaeda's plot, there's going to be ISIS, there's going to be HTS, there's going to be Al-Shabaab, there's going to be JNIM, there's going to be Al-Qaeda's other branches, AQAP, AQIM, there's Ansar al-Sharia from Libya, etc. So this is where it gets very, very complicated. This is kind of the new way that they have kind of innovated and grown, and we're not ready for this.
I think that's fascinating. And one of the other things that, you had made a comment about the recent CTC announcement and saying that, it's great to have Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Kent at the helm there, people who have been in the fight, in particular Joe, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. But, when you look at the previous administration and probably even in Trump's first administration, as the manipulation of ISIS and the Syrian and the development of what's taking place there, you have this kind of blind eye that's turned away from it. I mean, the whole thing with Legend going on Sean's show and talking about us still funding, the Taliban at $40 million a week, that's mind blowing to me. And so it seems like our intelligence community has almost been, focused on something else as all this has imagined. How hard is it to shift focus back and start putting assets and not organizations, but different units on the hunt now in real time?
Yeah, well, a lot of this happened because everybody failed to go after ISIS. And then when they realize ISIS isn't the JV team, they become this powerhouse, they shifted all the resources towards that. Well, the terrorists took advantage of that, as you can imagine. They're like, hey, America wants to fight ISIS, we'll fight ISIS. And that's when we started working with the Taliban against ISIS. Now we're working with Abu Muhammad al-Julani against ISIS, but we're not doing real operations. I wrote a whole 50-page report on how they're fake in Afghanistan. The same thing's happening. So far this year, we killed the head of ISIS twice in Syria. And guess what? He's alive. So we're going to kill him a third time. But so first off, we need leaders, especially CENTCOM, saying, yeah, we're not killing who we're saying we're killing. These are ruses. Our BDA is basically coming from terrorists. We're failing. Until the military and the intelligence community be honest that they're not really getting the targets they say, it's going to be really hard to fix that piece. Because remember, they're then the people who brief the president. So how's he going to know that we didn't really get the head of ISIS? Because he has the commander of CENTCOM telling him. So that's one really frustrating part. The other part is the CIA got the assessment wrong that Hamza bin Laden is dead. So they told it to President Trump in his last term, and he announced it to the country. Well, now they don't want to go tell Trump because he's obviously going to wipe out their whole department, which he should do. Because, they're covering their own butts. They're not doing what's right for the American people. So we have a lot of hubris in the intelligence agency. We have a lot of people who are protecting their turf. And remember, we have this frustrating piece that they're like, we just got to wait a few years. We wait this leader out. We get another leader, right? That's another thing you have to be really, really honest about. So it's going to be really hard to shift to Al-Qaeda. It's very difficult to get anyone to say Al-Qaeda. I think everybody kind of took this huge sigh of relief when Joe Kent's title said Al-Qaeda. Like, it was like, oh my God, we haven't been able to get anyone to say Al-Qaeda for like 4 years. Like, he brought almost like a lot of hope to the community. But they now need to get the rest of the IC on board, and we have not seen that happen yet.
Oh, that's disheartening. But hopefully, I mean, I'm out of everybody out there, I'm most optimistic with Joe and Tulsi. I mean, I think he's fought them. He's been there. He understands, the capability, and I just, hopefully he'll pivot. All right. One of the things that I think most civilians struggle with is just processing the reality of that could be true, that there are not just, 6 pilots that are hiding in different locations. And I tell you what, I'm really interested to see the Catherine. I don't know if you paid attention to Catherine Hendred's reporting recently about the exposure of the Saudi people that had actually welcomed in a couple of the pilots into California, supported them financially, all this. And that alone is just staggering. So, in these times, and as Tucker releases his 9/11 documentary, you're like, oh my God, is what's taking place, like what is the size of this look at? And I think most civilians can't fathom that or the entire process of how it takes place. So could you walk us through, one, like how does a sleeper cell get formed, right? Where does it get trained? Where do they, how do they end up making it into America? And just kind of walk us through how a cell will make it to a place all the way to where they're on standby to receive activation.
Sure. I mean, we'll talk present day because things have changed just a little bit. Mm-hmm. So how it's working now to do an external operation, if you're Al-Qaeda or ISIS, it really doesn't matter. You go into basically an external operations training camp, okay? And then if you meet muster and you're qualified and you meet the background necessary to go overseas, you kind of move up and keep doing added training and you learn different things. So obviously what they're looking for is that you're patient, you speak good English, you can blend in the West, you have some sort of skill or expertise that would be like a really great cover. So they look for people who can fit that background. It's very similar to the 9/11 hijackers. When you talk about like those Saudis who took care of him, we have to remember these 9/11 hijackers came from wealthy families. They were educated. They knew people within their governments. They went to school with the richest kids. So you have to keep that in mind, that they had personal relationships that might not be with the actual government. Right. It's because they grew up in these environments. I worked Kashmir for many years. Well, the Kashmiri terrorists who had wealthy families all went to the same boarding schools, right? So I'm just letting people know like that you're missing a little bit of nuances in actually the terrorists' personal relationships with people who are always willing to help them. As you know, it'd be like if someone reached out to me from my middle school, I'd jump to help them. Now, so they go through these camps. The interesting part is, first, what happens if you fail the camp, right? Like nobody talks about that. So if you're in an Al-Qaeda camp to come to the United States or Europe and you fail, what they do is they move you to an ISIS Khorasan province camp and you get a very short training session. It's maybe like to do stabbings or something like that, maybe make a few IEDs, and they deploy you to Europe. The interesting thing is then Taliban takes your name, they give it to European authorities, and European authorities look for you, wrap you up, or maybe you do an attack click and they miss it, but it looks like the Taliban gave it in advance, but that person was a flunky. Okay. Yep. So let's ignore the flunkies. Now, if you're really good, there's different routes you can go. So one route is just the suicide bomber training. So suicide bomber training now is 6 months. It's pretty crazy. Wow. You're on ecstasy. You learn how to make kind of these invisible bombs, and then you learn how to make a bunch of other IDs. You obviously go through months first of indoctrination. It's a lot. One of the biggest suicide bomber training camps is actually at Camp Chapman Coast Base. Wow. They train 2,500 external suicide bombers at a time. So every single one of those 2,500 is leaving Afghanistan. Think about that. It's very scary.
Unbelievable.
Now then, there's other things, and really we just call it advanced urban warfare because that's what they're calling it, but it's like CQB or whatever. Now, these are more like ground assault teams is the best way to put it. So they go through a variety of things. It can be driving training. They learn to make a ton of different IEDs. Obviously, they also are forced to learn the invisible bomb. And then a lot of thing is movement tactics inside buildings. They assault things, like they practice on like complexes, or they pretend it's like a church or a school. Remember, we left our shoot houses there. So I know in your head, where exactly they're practicing. Yep. Maybe too, you can explain that to people because it's hard. People talk about weapons left behind, but it's like, no, we left like the best training facilities in the world and they're using that. So that's kind of just your basic, hey, your first year in terrorist camp.
Wow. It's almost like a selection, right? It's like your buds or your selection or whatever it is. And then as you prove your worth and value, now you move into those more significant plot. Right. And yeah. And if you were, it's interesting. It almost felt like there was a hierarchy of the plots. Right. There's the initial like stabbing, the killing someone with ramming into people with cars, like in New Orleans. Real basic stuff. And then you have the bomber, which, is singular in nature. But then there's that October 7th Mumbai assault team that works in conjunction. And that for me is just like, whoa, that's another level that, they're going to be able to get really the impact that they're hoping that they receive from those types of operations, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point, the selection process, because I can just talk through a few things we've seen. In some cases, we've really seen Hamza bin Laden choose someone. And in those cases, it was mostly a second generation terrorist. His father was famous, so he gets chosen for an operation. We have one recently like that. He's leading one in the Middle East. His father was a very, very famous Egyptian, okay? So that's one category. There's another category when you prove yourself, right, on the battle, your proving grounds, and then you move up. And what they're doing in that case, you kind of move up into like an elite class, and you get to meet with Saif al-Adil, who is the mastermind of this homeland plot, very famous Egyptian, former military there. And those are kind of that smaller group, more important. Then there is the piece where people get to meet with Hamza bin Laden. So there has some that got to sit down and be blessed by Hamza bin Laden. We don't know if it's like they have set commanders leading on the ground here. And then obviously, as we know, the airplane suicide bombers have always been special. Osama bin Laden put out his video, the Manhattan Raid video, when he went in and actually chose the 20. So those have always been a top priority. So did Hamza actually meet with them? We're not sure which pockets, but he did sit down and bless some of them. So there are hierarchies. Now, that's just on the Al-Qaeda side. There are also hierarchies on the ISIS side.
Wow.
So ISIS, for the homeland plot, the best ones are chosen by a guy named Rajab Salahuddin. So he's basically the military general for ISIS Khorasan province. But some of them get to meet Sanaullah Ghaffari, the head of it, who blesses them. Now, this is the people who train in Afghanistan. There's also training in Syria, okay? And in Syria has similar pipelines. So there's an ISIS pipeline, and you basically fall under ISIS's military commission. It was Abdullah Maki. If you don't know him, we killed him in a strike in March in Iraq. So he was running that piece of the training pipeline, and he was actually connected to Jabr in New Orleans. So he ran Jabr's cell from Syria. Now then, there's a whole nother pipeline under Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the new president of Syria, and they're kind of like a lot of the HTS camps. And so they go through HTS's pipeline, and then they're deployed essentially from Syria by HTS. So it's really interesting. There's a number of senior leaders at the top, and the plot is approved by Al-Qaeda Shura and ISIS Shura. We've never had a plot like this ever to exist.
That were communicating in conjunction. It's almost like the aspiration of the grand caliphate is emerging, right? And my assumption is that it takes place, and out of that place becomes this ultra organization, right? That is all encompassing, and then that can be the rallying cry for the next revolution or the next intifada or whatever you wanted to call it.
I'm going to talk quick about that, though.
Yeah,
so they
please.
have a real caliphate plan. Now, in their minds, they're moving very aggressively on this. Obviously, Iran is the first country in the caliphate, even though it's not exactly affected by them. Afghanistan's the second. Syria's the third. They're hoping to make Somalia the fourth, and then they're looking Burkina Faso, Libya, and then they have a plan just like we saw in Syria for Iraq. So when they train for the Syrian Blitzkrieg, they train for an Iraqi one. So that is an upcoming plot. So to the terrorists, they're winning, and they have pieces of their caliphate back, and they believe they're going to aggressively take more countries. And even if we don't think they will, they do. And we have to remember they're using that, and they're excited by that.
Wow. Wow. All right. How do they, once they've gotten chosen, they've gone through selection, they've gotten their training, how do they make it to the United States? Because I think a lot of people right now, the borders are shut down. We've cut it all off. We're good to go. There's no way they can slip through. We're good. What's military on the southern border? How do they get there? How do they get over here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways. There's obviously rat lines. It could be from Afghanistan. Iran, Turkey, and we've even seen them from Libya. So the terrorists kind of go to one of them and they launch off. Most of the time they launch off and they go to Latin America and come up. Sometimes they launch off and they get official visa. So they might go through Europe and maybe be refugees at first, and then they might come through Canada and come in legally. Or we have had terrorists evacuated by the U.S. government who are non-Afghan as Afghans in the process. So we also evacuated a number of these Al-Qaeda and ISIS figures ourselves. Our government put them on our military bases in Ramstein and Qatar and brought them here, which is going to blow the American people's minds when we have dead terrorists and they ended up being shepherded out by the U.S. government. So there's multiple processes. They prefer, if they can, legal. Now, another thing is we always focus on Afghanistan, but remember, there is also a special immigrant visa pipeline for Iraq. ISIS has also used the Iraq pipeline and sent ISIS members through that CIV process. So it's not just the Afghanistan process that's compromised. It is also the Iraqi. Now, I just want to explain to you how this compromise works really quick, okay? So if you're a normal person, it's pretty cheap, maybe 8,000 or 9,000. You can get like fake HR letters that, let's just pick Bagram because everyone's talking about it. You worked at Bagram for a year as a cook. They fill it out, they submit it. So it's pretty cheap if you have no criminal background. If you're ISIS, it costs kind of between like 10,000 and 19,000. You pay for this paperwork to come here. If you're Al-Qaeda, it costs between 20 and 40,000.
Wow.
You get fake documents, but they're real, and you can come into a legal U.S. process that's just fine. Now, here's why it's so easy to exploit. For some reason, the U.S. government made the standard that you only had to work 1 year ever for our government in Afghanistan. Think about that. When I was in the CIA, for many years, I went overseas to this one location, and we had a really great squared away local. After 20 years, CIA gave him a SIV, which makes sense. Long time, long vetted, long service.
Yep.
These year ones, people don't know them. They're not vetted. You could have any real job in these military bases. So it's such a broken system. There's also a lot of corruption. There's Americans who took money to write fake letters, etc. All these contract companies who are based in Afghanistan are taking money from Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So it's a real compromised pipeline.
Wow. All right. So they make it over through all those variables. Once they get in, I mean, and I think, there was just a hearing on Capitol Hill, I think last week or the week before, where, a congressperson identified that out of the 400,000 missing kids, they've identified like 220,000 of them. And 40,000+ of those have been trafficked, have been sold into sex slavery and all this. And, but that's after the fact, taking it, trying to track it down. What is the process? They get here, and then where are they released? Where do they go? How do they begin to integrate or assimilate into, that covert action?
Yeah, so at least what we've seen from the few cell members, so we found about 15 terrorists so far in the United States. So I'm basing on a small population, but they all are involved in the upcoming plot, okay? So they haven't done an action yet. Now, what we've learned from them is most of them did come illegally the last few years. So they come in and then they go to a certain point, right? Certain cities have kind of like a welcome point is the best way to put it. And they go there and they already have a job lined up. They already kind of joined their cell, and they have the community involved around them as part of their terrorist cell. So they don't come here as a one-off and have to make it work. It's all set and ready for them. Now, when they come here, they have lots of times a regular cover job, but a lot of people call them sleepers, thinking, oh, they're just waiting until the date of the attack. But no, they all have something they're supposed to do. Some, like, their job is really to make IEDs. Like, this guy just makes pipe bombs. This guy just makes sticky bombs. This guy just makes suicide vests. And that's their job for months and months and months. There's chemicals. Unfortunately, there's a chemical piece of this. Your job is in the chemical lab. There's surveillance, counter surveillance, a lot of intelligence collection. Remember, they want to go into veteran communities. Well, a piece of the part of going into veteran communities, there are certain veterans they are interested in targeting. So as you can imagine, they need to get their pattern of life, those type of things. So there is a lot of work going on by sleeper cells, and some of them have been in country 2 years doing these processes. And so people need to understand they're well employed, they're active. Now, another piece that's really fascinating is some of them have a job to where they have to build the cell within the United States. So they have to bring in more cell members recruited on U.S. soil, which is very, very fascinating. But also, those should be easier to find because they're actually making outreach, they're recruiting people, et cetera. So just to let you know, the sleepers are very, very active.
Yeah. I think, when we see those ideas of Dearborn, Michigan, that have, the streets are covered with midday call and they block the streets, and you're like, all right, then it's the local mosque. That's the traditional place. Is that if you're in quote sleeper cell, are you going to facilitate or utilize the cultural pockets within these different cities? Or will they be independent? Will they be unique? Will they be, the one or two people living in an apartment, in some random city away from those larger pockets of what, American citizens will be like, oh, well, that's a unique pocket of foreigners that is what it is, right? Like in Portland, there's a large contingency of Somalis, right? Wherever it is that what they utilize to help foster not only the financing, but the relationships to be employed, also the ability, the outreach, community outreach to bring people in? Is that, or is it ultra covert, low profile stuff?
Yeah, first off, they wanted to do the complete opposite of 9/11. So they're not going to put like 3 people in a small town and then people like, these guys are strange, they're not fitting in, they're not joining anything, they don't seem to be getting jobs. Like, that's over, right? So they are all in communities where they make sense. Now, that doesn't mean they're in fully Muslim communities or housing, of course. So, because remember, these are going to be very westernized people. So this isn't going to be someone who comes off as a very extreme Islamist, right? That's not his cover. So he's going to be able to hang out in New Orleans just fine, right? So people have to stop focusing on they're in these Muslim-only communities. Like that's like just not how it's working, especially the ethnicities I know here, like the Somali I know that's here is not in one of the Somali communities, right? So, just from the backgrounds. And again, it's not like different terrorist groups are going certain ways. They really are intermixed. And what I feel a lot of location is based on is the skill set of what they're in charge of doing or what piece of the plot is theirs. So if they're going to be the VBID guy, they got to go into the part of the country where they're going to make the VBIDs, obviously. If you're the suicide bomber, let's say you're the suicide bomber in aviation, where you're going to go near where the first hub airport is, right, for your operation. So it's based more on the operational strategy. And then you're in a community, of course, though, where you blend in and make sense. Now, there are little tells that have always been there. So one thing Al-Qaeda always does is they're still strict. So if you have, let's say it's a safe house, it's just going to be an apartment, and there's rules involved in the safe house. One is women never come to the safe house, right? So you got these young, good-looking, educated guys. A few of them always go to this building and never bring a woman, never bring a child. It's kind of a tell. I don't know if you read ever the Manchester Manual.
No.
Oh, I don't know if it's like 15 or 20 years ago. It got pulled out of an op in Britain. You can get a really good copy of it online because it was used in a court case. But there's a piece in there that actually walks through what they look for when they get a safe house, but it's really just an apartment. And it's actually really interesting and fascinating. And I think people should read it because they still look for like their safe houses the same way. And there are some unique features, like especially 2 doors, like which, a lot of apartments have 1 door. So there's also weird things like you can't overlook courtyards or pools. They don't want you to see women and all these type of things. So there's all these interesting things. They have also multiple documents, right? Multiple identities. So I do think people should look at that because you can learn a lot from it.
That's fascinating. That's the type of thing I think people are hungry for, right? They're trying to figure out, all right, if because you put in any small municipality, and certainly the counterterrorism budgets have, shrunken to almost nil. And, I mean, I remember in the heyday when I was at Blackwater, we had 3,000 people a day training at the, at the facility, and most of those were small community law enforcement agencies because they got some federal funding to be on the look. Well, that's not happening right now. So how is the message being received in your mind, or what on the smaller municipalities, the smaller agencies, the place that has, 200 police officers and a small SWAT contingency is what are they doing in preparation for all of this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've met a lot of law enforcement organizations since January, very large ones and very small ones. And it's more been based on if they have like some go-getters in the department that like press their leadership and like, this is important. We got to get briefed on this. There's a lot of SWAT teams who don't have the funding to do it, but they're changing their tactics. Obviously, I'm not going to explain how, so terrorists don't know. But anyway, so it's really a lot of go-getters. Unfortunately, we started off, as you can imagine, a lot of people in law enforcement being like, well, is it going to happen in my town? What I like to say is, well, what percentage of your town is veterans, right? Like that's where you start. Also, if it's going to go on for multiple days, potentially, well, are you going to get called to back up? How far away are these cities from you? Now, we don't know a lot of the cities. We know some of the states ISIS is focused on. And then the AQAP video has a few cities, but that doesn't mean that's where they'll be. But right. There's a lot of focus on Pennsylvania in this threat. A lot. If you are in any city in Pennsylvania, you should be preparing, in my opinion, right? So there are certain states that have been very forward-leaning. Florida's been very forward-leaning. Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee. We've been up to New York multiple times. So luckily there are pockets. The problem is until Mr. Kent put out this memo this week, a lot of them didn't have anything to stand on when they went to try to sell, hey, we need to move funds to do this kind of training. So a lot of them were doing like, we need to do different kinds of active shooter training. And this is really smart. So what they did, and I think people should do this if you don't get support, you say, we need to do an active shooter drill, but we need to do an active shooter drill with 3 shooters hitting 2 locations, right? Yeah. Very simple change, but it does help with this threat. And you don't have to say it's counterterrorism related. Unfortunately, right, you got to play other ruses to sometimes get money or the funding or the support. But we've seen a lot of people do really creative things.
That's fascinating to me because that's the one plot that I think is the one that resonates with me. It's the one I'll never forget when Mumbai took place. Not that, I'm praising the attack, but the tactics in that were the best I had ever seen, right? They were just 10 guys wreaking havoc, holding the city hostage for 58 hours or whatever it was. And if imagine that with, in a smaller city of 250,000, 300,000 people, a smaller police force, not a lot of big government entities that can respond. It's like that's the thing that is really the most alarming, in particular if people, like you're saying, had a year and a half of training and preparation and, access to the other things. Because a lot of I think people are like, well, where are they going to get their guns? How are they going to get their tactical equipment? Yeah, right. It's like, how are they going to get their tactical equipment? Where are they training? And it's like, it's just not realistic. And that's what I hear a lot of people and read a lot of people as I, comb through your trolls when you make your posts and, and want to go after them. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. But, that's what I think people are kind of, what I'm concerned of. And so how do people in their local communities, civilians, what can they do to kind of be heads up, head on a swivel, increase their SA? And then if one of those incidents does take place and they're engaged and around it, I mean, obviously, I think all the veterans that they're going to be going, most veterans that I know, at least my friends, all carry. Now I know a lot of dudes that are actually carrying backpacks with, suppressed automatic or semi-automatic, long guns in there. What is the deconfliction and what is the reaction that people can have in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, your hope is to not be on the X or in the location where it happens. What I like to try to tell people is your focus is on your family emergency plan and being home and protecting your family, or at least protecting your neighborhood, right? Have a neighborhood group watch, they block off the neighborhood if something is happening. And then your police handle the city and the roads, your sheriff handle, the main highways, etc. Now, as you said, we're going to have a lot of people rolling on this attack if it happens. We're just going to, because we've had warfighters training for 20 years. So what we've been at least trying to do in Florida, and we're pushing in other states, is have those meetings and conversations now, especially with the veteran organizations in your town. Know who they are, because we have a problem where the terrorists might dress as law enforcement. So now when you see this veteran you've never met, well-trained, well-armed, he looks like law enforcement. Is he an attacker? Is he not? There's going to be a lot of confusion in this. So we're telling everyone, make all the relationships you can now, right? Bring community into it now, because you're in a better spot. Also, as you can imagine, let's say they hit the hospital, right? And then they do a second round. Well, now you can't use the hospital. Well, did you have conversation with the local schools, the local churches? Did you stockpile medical supplies elsewhere? Do you even have the blood levels where they need to be at the blood banks in your town? There are very, very simple things that will help in any emergency that people are not doing. And we need to get citizens involved, right? I get my house in order. I get my kids' school in order, I get my church in order, and then I work with the mayor, the police chief, or whoever to get the community in order. And I think that's the best way we at least handle how we protect and defend ourselves. Now, when something like this happens, the scale it's going to happen at, it's going to be like 9/11. You didn't know what 9/11 was, but you went the hell home. And that's what you need to really focus on. The majority of people are going to need to keep themselves and the people they love safe.
Awesome. That's fantastic. All right. Last question. Obviously, we saw the president of Syria on stage with General Petraeus recently, and the acknowledgement of this is for me in particular. I know for you, I've listened to you. I know all my friends are just in absolute, astonished disbelief that this is taking place. What, in your opinion, is the right way for the government to begin to acknowledge this is real, and then to really what would you like to see with them working with in and around the IC community, but all the other government agencies, Homeland Bureau, all that? What would you like to start to see take place?
Yeah, I mean, our government first has to be honest, right? Al-Qaeda is going to do this massive attack. Then they have to cut off the pieces of the misinformation. That's obviously the information coming from the Taliban and the information coming from the new Syrian government. This is now tainted intelligence, and we need to handle it as such. Even if you take it from them, fine, but it needs to be marked. So if I'm an analyst in DIA and I read the CIA report, it says on it the CIA got it from the Taliban, because that is not happening, right? Then, so you have to do that. You also have to have the real discussion. The terrorists know we collect plenty of things over the phones. Most of them got captured on their phones. So they actually sit and do planning and strategy meetings for what they're going to say on the phone so NSA can collect it. So we have to stop saying NSA information is corroboration, right? Because that is also tainted. We have to be very honest. It's hard for people in the intelligence community to admit, I've been fooled by terrorists, but we have been. Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri fooled us with the coast bombing. He fooled us with Hamza and Saad bin Laden. Like, there are real factual things where the intelligence community failed. Now, this is just another one. So we first got to be honest about that. I do think with a Tulsi and Joe at the helm, I do think they don't have the hubris, and I think they'll care more to protect Americans. And now they got to get everybody else on board. So that's one thing. The other part is, the only way to thwart a terrorist attack is you got to be proactive against it, which we haven't been. One way to be proactive against it is you got to go after the masterminds. I know no one's going to put Giuliani in the X right now, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to ignore probably the Syria piece of it, which I don't think we should be doing. But we should be going after Saif al-Adil. There's no argument. Saif al-Adil is one of the most wanted terrorists in the world. And, CENTCOM is actually ignoring information being provided to them on his location. They are not actively targeting him, which is crazy. Wow. So he's the mastermind of this plot. Obviously, they have to be honest about the bin Laden sons, start collecting on them. Think about it. They have not collected against Saad bin Laden since 2009. That is an intelligence failure like you could never believe. So there has to be a lot of honesty. You got to say, hey, we messed this up. Let's get it straightened out. And CENTCOM has not been honest about the ISIS fight. I don't know if we need the Secretary of War to say, hey, I'm going to do some sort of counterintelligence review, just like the CIA chief needs to do a counterintelligence review of the Afghanistan department. But something is wrong. Now, is it just bad reporting? Is it these relationships with the terrorists, et cetera? I don't know what it is, but we have to find the root causes of some of these problems. Lastly, we brought in all these terrorists. We got to move them out faster. We have to prioritize at least their nationalities, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying block everybody from those countries, but we know there's certain passports that are compromised. Afghanistan, Syria, Turkey, Libya. I'm sorry, every single person with one of those passports better be in rooms all week long being questioned, because I don't even know if these people on Afghan passports are Afghan. Well, I want an Afghan sitting in front of them talking to them. Let's do some enhanced vetting.
From your lips, Sarah, from your lips to his ears, man. I just hope people are listening to you. I know your audience has certainly grown. I just can't thank you enough for having the courage. Obviously, it doesn't always put you in the safest space, but I know you're protected. I know you're smart, and I know you're watching your six all the time. I just can't thank you enough for spending time with my audience and me. God bless you for what you're doing, and just keep it up. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What's up, everybody? I am here to talk to you about fear. Well, one of the things that I hear so much when I travel the country, speaking to thousands of people every year, is people want to always know, was I afraid? And they ask me, were you afraid in combat? Were you afraid in training? And, I'm here to tell you that those are really intimate questions, because the answer is, hell yes, I was afraid. I was afraid all the time. Imagine every single day you go into work is a day you could die. Well, it took me a long time to get comfortable with being able to answer that question sincerely. I used to blow it off in some snapperhead response, like, well, have you ever had a 300-pound boat on your head and stayed awake for 5 straight days with some instructor screaming in your face all day? And they'd be like, no. And I go, well, you'd be afraid too, right? And I kind of blew it off in this kind of snapperhead way, as I said. And the reality is people actually genuinely want to know. With the assassination of Charlie Kirk, with an imminent terrorist attack threat on the homeland, with financial chaos on the precipice of $38 trillion in debt, there's a lot of fear going on around the world, and most importantly in our country. And so what I've done, in conjunction with the past 35 years of me really trying to explore, experience, and research everything that I could within the human condition to try and understand what drives success and what ultimately creates failures with teams or individuals. The first place that I wanted to focus on was embracing fear, because there's no such thing as fearless. Right? If you hear somebody tell you, oh, that person's fearless, you know what I say to that? It doesn't exist, right? You've got a limbic system. You've got these 3 beautiful components of your brain called the amygdalas and the hippocampus. Those produce stress hormones. Therefore, you have fear. Plus, fear has been integrated into our consciousness since Well, since consciousness began, right? Fear is ultimately the thing that enables you to either survive, thrive, or die. It's just built into the whole capacity. On top of that, you learn fear from the moment you're born. You learn fear, don't touch the burning stove. Don't cross the street without looking twice. Don't go around the freak who's trying to, suck you into the van, right? We have all these things in our lives that are integrated into how we process fear, how we experience fear, how we feel fear, how fear affects us in our daily routines. Well, after a considerable amount of time spent trying to understand fear itself, I spent about 2 years really digging into fear. I came up with the idea that fear cannot be defeated, obviously. So what do we have to do? We have to embrace fear. So after that 2 years of dedicated research and exploration into the mindset behind fear, I began to develop what I call my Embrace Fear seminar. Now, I've been teaching this for well over 10 years since I left the Central Intelligence Agency, where I was both an instructor and operational. And I began teaching this seminar. Well, a few years ago, I finally decided to put it into a form for you. So if you have the inclination, if you have any little bit of fear in your life or even a lot of fear that seems to impede your ambition or distract your performance or really overwhelm your ability to operate in a functional way in your life, then what I'm asking you to do is take that leap of faith and go visit davidrutherford.com, look under courses, and sign up for your Embrace Fear course. Now, in this course, there are 5 modules, or I call missions. First is to search for the truth of your fear, right? That's first thing. And within that, there are 4 sub-steps that you do there. Now, this course is designed to take place over a 4-month period where each sub-step takes 1 week to focus on, right? And these are journal-based entries or activities that we provoke you to do. Mission number 1 is search for the truth of your fear. Mission number 2, accept the reality of your fear. Mission number 3 is to retrain your brain to deal with your fear. Mission number 4 is to test yourself and your fear every day. And then mission number 5, the ultimate mission of all, is to be able to live with courage as with fear in your life. Now, I spent a tremendous amount of time. I've given this course multiple times to multiple organizations, and I've worked extensively with individual professional athletes, CEOs of businesses, other operators, and people that were struggling with this profound impediment on developing your performance capabilities, which is fear itself. So, again, if you want an excellent way to learn to live with that fear, not only with strength, but also being able to manipulate that perception of it in such a way that it actually drives you forward, it becomes a motivational tool for you to accomplish your dreams, to achieve the things you've always wanted to achieve by learning to embrace your fear. So, go to davidrutherford.com, look under courses, and find the Embrace Fear course. Take 5 months or 5 weeks to accomplish this. And I promise you, at the end of this, you will be able to embrace your fear and go after the ultimate dream in your life. Thank you. Booyah.